Chapter 6 discusses photosynthesis. Chapter 6, Section 1 begins by explaining that photosynthesis is a biochemical pathway that converts light energy from the sun into chemical energy or food energy, which we would refer to as organic compounds or carbohydrates or sugars. All of those things are various food energies that the plant can then utilize. A biochemical pathway is simply a reaction that can sustain another reaction. So photosynthesis produces products that are then able to start another reaction called cellular respiration. The products of cellular respiration then are able to restart the photosynthesis process, and they feed into one another. Now, there's different ways of organisms to obtain their energy. Autotrophs are organisms that are going to use energy from the sun to make their food, so things that will photosynthesize. Some common ones are plants, algae, some types of bacteria even are considered to be autotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms like us. They have to actually go out and obtain their energy from the food that they consume. Here's an overview of the photosynthetic process. The first section we will focus on the light reactions, and then in section 2 we will talk about the Calvin cycle or dark reactions. But overall, the photosynthesis process involves the light reaction, which is just as it sounds. The light energy from the sun gets captured and is converted into chemical energy. And that chemical energy is stored temporarily in ATP and another molecule called NADPH. And all that does is just help to store that energy for the next step. In step number 2, that's the Calvin cycle or the dark reactions. And now at this point, we don't need sunlight anymore. We've already got that taken care of in the first part. What we're doing here is taking the stored energy from the ATP and NADPH, combining it with carbon dioxide, and making our organic compounds or our sugar from that. So this is our reaction here, our carbon dioxide reacting with water combined with light energy, and that will make sugar or a carbohydrate and oxygen. So you will need to know either this formula equation, CO2 plus H2O yields C6H12O6 plus O2, or you'll need to know it in word form either way. So carbon dioxide plus water and sunlight will yield sugar and oxygen. Now, to capture this energy from the sun, the energy needs to be absorbed somehow, and that happens in the chloroplasts, which are organelles that are unique to plants. Animal cells do not have these chloroplasts. Inside the chloroplasts are thylakoids, which are these individual disc structures. Stacks of them are called grana. Okay, a single stack is a granum, multiple stacks are grana. And then there's liquid that also will flow through this chloroplast, and that is called stroma. Now, within this thylakoid membrane here, that's where there are going to be pigments that help to absorb or reflect light. Now, in the UV spectrum, you probably heard Roy G. Biv, all the different colors, red, orange, yellow, and so on. The colors that are absorbed are going to be used for energy by the plant, and the ones that are not absorbed are then reflected, and the reflected ones are the ones that we will see. So again, when white light strikes an object, its colors are either reflected or absorbed. Most plants are going to reflect green. That's what we see when we look at trees and grass and plants, and the green is probably one of the most common colors that we will see. So that's what's being reflected. The other shades are being absorbed. There are pigments within those thylakoids that help to do the absorbing of the light. Here's a diagram of the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and you can see that the different wavelengths of light will have different amounts of energy. Down towards the orange and red side of the scale, you're going to have lower energy than the purples and the blues. So depending on which wavelengths of light are being absorbed, the plant can get different amounts of energy. Within the thylakoid membrane, so those little disc structures inside the chloroplasts, are these pigments. One of the main pigments is called chlorophyll A. That's going to be really important in these light reactions. It absorbs the majority of the light from the sun. There are also accessory pigments that can help. A couple of those are chlorophyll B, carotenoids, xanthophylls. So there are other pigments that you can use as well that help, but they don't absorb quite as much energy as the chlorophyll A does. So they're just accessory pigments. And those are the ones that we start to see in the fall. Chlorophyll A doesn't hold up well in cold temperatures, and so what happens is it starts to break down, and now instead of seeing those green colors appear, we'll start to see the reds and oranges and different shades of leaves coming out. This diagram is showing how much light is being absorbed by these various pigments. You can see chlorophyll A absorbs a lot of light in the blue end of the spectrum, and then it has another peak towards the oranges and reds. Chlorophyll B is a little bit further down, closer to the green-yellow. Carotenoids more into some of the oranges. And all of these pigments combined then help to bring in as much energy as possible for the plant. If you only had one of these pigments, then it just wouldn't be able to absorb quite as much energy. Photosystems are clusters of pigments and proteins that are together in the thylakoid membrane. There are two main types of photosystems, photosystem 1 or PS1 and photosystem 2 or PS2. This is kind of a breakdown of what exactly is happening when the light gets absorbed into those thylakoids. So this diagram here is showing the thylakoid membrane. This is outside of the thylakoid. This is the liquid stroma, and this portion here is the inside of the thylakoid. Now light energy comes in, and this big green structure here is photosystem 2. So there's pigments in here, there are proteins in here, and when that sunlight comes in, what it does is excites the electrons in the chlorophyll A pigment. And once electrons are excited by this extra energy, they will start to move. So those electrons from photosystem 2 will move to the next molecule in the membrane, which is called the primary electron acceptor. From there, it will continue down this chain of molecules until it reaches photosystem 1. This is called the electron transport chain, or ETC. Now, as they go, they will lose energy. Just like us, the more you move, the more energy you're going to lose. So those electrons then are going to end up finally stopping at photosystem 1. Now, during this process and that movement from molecule to molecule, they will also cause some hydrogen ions from the stroma to flow into the thylakoid. So protons or H+ ions will be coming into the thylakoid from there. Now, at the same time as photosystem 2, light's also being absorbed by photosystem 1, and their electrons are getting excited. Those electrons will then move to the primary electron acceptor and continue going down its own electron transport chain. So here's photosystem 1, more light's coming in. The electrons will get excited, move to the primary electron acceptor, and start down its transport chain. Okay. Now during that process, they will help to form the NADPH storage molecule, which is going to hold some of the energy for the dark reactions. Now, what's water's role? Because water is one of the reactants in photosynthesis. Well, water is going to replace electrons that were used in photosystem 2. So the water molecule actually gets split apart. The hydrogens continue to build up that concentration gradient within the thylakoid. Oxygen will form oxygen gas, and that will later be released, which is one of the products of photosynthesis. And the extra electrons then will go to replace the ones that were used up in photosystem 2. So that will allow this process to continue. If there weren't enough water, then we're not going to be able to replenish the electrons that were already used. The last part of this process is called chemiosmosis. Now, in this diagram, you can see all these H+ ions that have built up inside the thylakoid. Here's our membrane, and this is outside the thylakoid. Now, this molecule here is an enzyme called ATP synthase. Remember that ACE ending signifies an enzyme, and to synthesize just means to make something. So we're making ATP through this molecule. Well, with this higher concentration of H plus ions here, they will want to flow down to the less concentrated area, and by doing that, they will help combine with ADP in a phosphate to make ATP. So now we have NADPH and we also have ATP molecules that are storing energy for the second part of our reactions, or our dark reactions.